right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us wherever you're tuning in from. We have joining us from Russia, Germany, the Netherlands. So we're really all over. See you, folks. 50 minutes of unscripted .NET entertainment. As doctors of .NET, we prescribe healthy choices in .NET. I'm your host, Luis, and today I'm joined by my fellow co-host, David and Cam. And here we have our guest as well, Sophie Obomighie, who is joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. Sophie, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, hello. So my name is Sophie Obomighie. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a software developer, mostly back end. So C Sharp is my main stack. I have been writing C Sharp since last year, early last year, like March. I attended a boot camp, a training, and then internships, and I'm still working now. So yeah, so that's really about me.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So you had mentioned that you just started C Sharp back in. I looked at your profile page on the .NET Foundation that you put together. I'm going to throw that in chat real quick for our friends here online. But you started in March of 2020. So your entire adventure into C Sharp and .NET is very, very pure and innocent, and you're new. And that's safe to say. So it's exciting because we really value those perspectives. And so I'm excited for the show today, and we're thrilled to have you on.
Yeah, I am too. I'm very thrilled to have the opportunity to share my knowledge from a beginner's perspective.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's always helpful for us, especially, as doc writers, as we try to understand, well, if somebody hadn't, it's their first time looking at these topics, how would they approach it, or how would they try to learn these things? So speaking of learning and docs, Cam, you want to go over and learn so we can learn about ASP.NET Core APIs?
Let's do a checkup. All right, so this week's checkup document is a Microsoft Learn module. Create a web API with ASP.NET Core. This was, I believe, the first Microsoft Learn module that our friend Scott Addy and I wrote together. This is exactly what it says on the label. It is a module that will walk you through the very beginning process of writing a web API. So if you've never done that, you can come over here to the URL that's scrolling at the bottom of your screen. It'll launch this Microsoft Learn module, and you'll step through. And a couple of steps into the unit, you get to this interface where we have you run a little script that sets up some .NET's dependencies and some other stuff. And you can actually use the Cloud Shell editor to edit the code right there in your browser and get hands-on experience. It doesn't cost you anything. It's all in the browser. So check that out and let us know what you think.
So it doesn't cost you anything? And so this is like free learning. So unlike, other services out there, this is entirely free. You can go and it right?
Yep. So yeah, and we use this. So we use the Azure Cloud Shell, and in fact, we use it probably a lot more than what other Microsoft Learn modules have tried to do in the past. Our modules really take you through like a project, like a full blown project, and really get you in there and get you actually changing some code and making some connections as you go, hopefully.
Awesome. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
My pleasure. So with that, I'm super eager to talk to our guest this week because she, as she mentioned earlier, she's been programming in C# for, I guess she said, about a year. So she's still pretty new, and I'm eager to hear what she thinks. So how about a hallway track, guys?
Let's do it. So, Sophie, we know that you want to share your screen. We can add that now. And you have some stuff that you want to walk us through. And I know that there was a play on
Yeah.
words originally in the title, right? You've got was it a Harry Potter theme that was trying to
Yeah.
sneak in?
Yeah. So exactly. So in the beginning, I wanted to sneak in Harry Potter into my talk somehow because I'm in the period of my life of being addicted to Harry Potter.
Awesome.
So which house
Yeah,
are
but
you?
I mean, it was too long.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Sometimes I feel like I'm Ravenclaw. I said
Ravenclaw.
sometimes I feel like I'm Ravenclaw. Yeah. But then sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I'm Hufflepuff. I'm really not sure.
You know, those both are both those are both great houses to be in. And we could all day. I was actually introduced to Harry Potter by a dear friend. You know, like I never would have read the books or the movies if she hadn't introduced them to me. And I'm right there with you. But anyway, back to our discussion here. What do you have to show us?
Yeah, so before I begin, I wanted to like go back a bit to what you mentioned about the Microsoft Learn material. So I mean, during my learning process and all, I've been spending a lot of time using the Microsoft Learn materials, and I mean, different materials usually come with different perspectives, obviously because different people write it. So, yeah, so I have Microsoft Learn to thank for how far I have come now. Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
and my talk is, I mean, is exactly highly influenced by Microsoft Learn and I mean other courses and then my own understanding. Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome to
Okay.
hear.
So yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'll just go right in so we could. Yeah, so I just have like a short outline
Mhm.
because so we don't lose track. So I would love to first of all talk about like APIs in general because since this is an introductory talk, it's important that we don't assume that everybody knows what APIs really are. Then I mean, I don't think there's anything that doesn't have a disadvantage. So I will talk just a bit about the pros and cons of using APIs and the different types of APIs, like what people have built, and then the standards, and then so when I was thinking about when I was preparing this talk, I was thinking you could actually look at it from the aspect of building APIs, or you could look at it from the aspect of working with APIs, right? So I
Hmm.
said, okay, I could talk about both of them, but then even though the first one is of more importance to me. Okay, then the next thing, I mean, diving in straight up is like what are APIs? So when I saw this material where they called it rules, I think protocols are a better a better word to use, but like I mean general ideas that kind of guide how computers interact with each other. Because just like how human beings interact with each other, computers also have to interact. So I also have some interest in this thing of human computer interaction. And I mean, I don't think you can understand how humans and computers interact without understanding how, first of all, computers interact with their own kind. So APIs really they help in the communication, the transfer of data between each other because their language is ones and zeros data. And then where really can you find these APIs? So they are kind of like a middle ground. So APIs, at first, I thought APIs were like back end. But then I understand that APIs really are like the the middleman between the application itself and then the web server, like where the data is coming from and all of that. So it's like a middleman and so important because it also helps with security. So you're not directly linked to from your client facing aspect of your application. You're not directly linked to your web server. So I mean it helps with security and all. And you can do much more. Yeah.
So I just want to point out that that's a great point. I'd never actually. Well, I won't say never. The rules that explain how computers or applications communicate with each other. I like how you kind of frame that as before we really understand human-computer interaction, it helps to understand the computer-computer interaction, right? That's a great point.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So I will go forward. Just a bit more. How? So now we understand what APIs in layman terms, what they really are. So how then do they work? So thanks to Google, I found a very a very explanatory step, and so it begins really from the client facing part. The interaction begins from the client facing part. So maybe, I don't know, Postman or your web browser, but a client application initiates an API call. So it makes a request to the API, right? And then the API kind of goes to look for the request you make looks for the resource. Like when you make a request, you are looking for a resource. So that's where this thing of uniform resource identifier comes in, because every resource has an identifier. So when I make a request, I am saying, hello, Mr. I need to find this. Can you please give me this basket of so amount of this data? Can you give me this? So it won't know where to look for if each resource doesn't have an identifier. So it begins really with the client's application making a request, and then of course the request is identified through the URI. And then this request usually has a verb, a header, and sometimes has a request body. I mean, most of the time, but then there are some requests you make that may not require a request body. Okay, and then moving forward, how it still works. So after the API has received the request, so not just any request, a valid request, like it has to be the correct type, the correct header, the correct verb, the correct request body. So it has to be a valid request. We will talk about that more later. And then, so after the API would now make a call to the web server. Remember, I said that the API is like a middleman between the web server and the client-facing part. So then it makes a call, and then the server would now send a response to the API. So, I mean, why won't the server send straight up to the application itself? Because, like I said, the API kind of now like abstracts, like makes it safer. So it's this thing of attacks. I think it's called cross-origin attacks. Like there's a lower chance of having like cyber attacks. That is your data. Your data is not easily compromised. Then the API will then transfer the data to the application that made the request. So it began from the application making a request, and then the API will now wait for a request from the server, and then the server sends a response back, and then the API, like a very dutiful butler, sends the request back to the response back to the client's application. Okay.
Sophie, before you continue, would it be possible to go full screen with the slides, into presentation mode?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. I can do that.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to put a couple of questions that we had come up through here in the chat,
Okay.
and we're going to just kind of address those real quick in rapid order. So there was a question, can SOAP be consumed with Web API? So SOAP is actually a protocol. It's simple object access protocol. It's XML based. You can do Web API with XML as your transport, data type. You can use JSON or binary. There's different ways to do that, but those are really two different things. There was another question. Someone asked, what's secure HTTP? And I think they're referring to HTTPS, which is the secure protocol. Peter Wright asks, how would you determine when to use Web API over a library API? So if you're comfortable answering that one, Sophie, otherwise I can address it as well.
Yeah, so I think by library API, he's probably referring to like APIs that are, I don't know, publicly available. I'm not sure.
That's what I would assume too.
That,
Yeah.
but then,
I
Yeah.
would say
Okay.
that
Yeah. I
with
mean.
go ahead.
Just go on. Just go on. Yeah.
I was going to say with web API, it's typically interacting with some sort of web resource. Library APIs can come from
Yeah.
different packages within .NET, like the ecosystem. So they may or may not be making web calls. It all depends on what the data is. So it's kind of a case by case scenario. There's a
Yeah.
couple more things here. API. Yeah, okay. I think that's it for now. That's all the questions we had. So you can continue.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I am done with how APIs work. Now, the next thing is the pros and the cons. I mean, the pros outweigh the cons. That's why it's so popular. So some of the pros, like the developer spends less time trying to debug, so you have less details. Imagine having like, I don't know, 10,000 lines of code and then trying to debug every time. But then with APIs, you can build once and then just share. So you can just make requests right to the APIs, and then you can even like monetize it, right? Give people access. So I know an API like Wallet.Africa. I know that they allow the developers to access their APIs. And then I mean there are so many others. I mean that's like a payment platform. So there are so many others. So I didn't need to build a payment platform from start. I just had to just plug into their own API. So you spend less. Well, so by less details, I mean like you have less code to debug, and then speed. I mean you can think of an idea and like, oh, there's an API for this. I mean that doesn't mean you can't build yours. You can, but depending on a case by case scenario, you can spend more time innovating and I mean less time trying to debug your code. And then also there is an improvement of collaboration. I would say this is because I mean so many reasons for the different API protocols like SOAP that you mentioned, REST. I mean there are relatively established ways of writing your API, of designing your API. Yeah. Yeah. So then I've spoken about innovation and then monetization. So you could build APIs and put it up on Rapid API or as a company share with other companies or with other departments and stuff like that. And then I mentioned security also. I think this is the most important because it's since it's serving as a layer between your data and then even your client facing part of the application, it is more secure. But then one con with APIs really is you have less control, right? Like you cannot modify the code as much. I mean, when you plug into other people's APIs, but I mean, if you build your own API, you can always tweak it. But when you have to plug into other people's APIs, that it's always difficult to make so many changes or changes that you would have loved to make. Okay, then some examples. I came across this, and I was thinking, would you say the types the project people have built with APIs are examples of APIs? Like I could see that some people try to like put them into categories. How people have built so many APIs? How would you categorize each? Anyway, for simplicity's sake, I understand that you have like universal logins. So let's say you want to log into GitHub and you use I don't know if you can use your Twitter account, but I mean you can use a social media account to log in, so you don't have to have like it reduces the amount of accounts you have to create. You put in your email, blah blah blah. But then it's an application of APIs, right? And then payment platforms, like I spoke about Wallets to Africa, and then Paystack and PayPal and stuff like that. And then event booking, I know many people who have built like APIs that you could just plug in. I don't know, you could plug into their APIs and then set up your own front end and I mean, it works. So different innovative ideas. You could just think of something. I know the most common one is to do API just to practice. But then also there is another category of APIs. So you have like open APIs that are publicly available. So I think that's what the person who asked the question, I believe that's what he's referring to when he says library APIs. Yeah. Anyway, but then open APIs are freely available for developer use. And then you have partner APIs. So maybe your company is a Microsoft partner company, or you have some relationship with this company. So or you have to like sign up to use this as a developer, sign up, and then they have to like make sure that I don't know some form of authentication. Then you can now use the APIs. So those are partner APIs, and then you have internal APIs. I mean, those ones are just for within companies. They are not freely available, and then composite API. So these ones could be like a mixture, but then they're usually used for microservices. Yeah. So this is really just to make the whole thing, the whole idea of APIs a bit simplified. Yeah. So I don't think it's really it's really a standard classification as such. Okay. Then we have protocols. You mentioned someone mentioned SOAP.
This is good. Yeah, this is good timing because there were questions about soap in the
Yeah,
chat.
exactly. So for SOAP, I know it's one of the protocols. I haven't used SOAP before, but I know after REST, SOAP is the most popular. And I know also of XML RPC. I know of gRPC as well, which is Google's product. And then JSON RPC. So I'm most familiar with REST. And I think also why I feel like the reason why it's more popular is because it's not as rigid as the others, um, and like, so the principles that you apply when using REST is not really as rigid as the others. I would explain more as we move forward. And then okay, yeah, I wanted to talk about design patterns, but I think I'll come to that later. Okay, so to expatiate more on REST, since it's the most popular, so the thing about REST is like it's like a combination of protocols. It's not just a particular way of doing things. Like an architecture, this is how like you write APIs with using the REST protocol. And then it's usually not always HTTP. Sometimes, I mean, someone mentioned HTTPS, that's secure hypertext transfer protocol. And then sometimes, I mean, those are the two I'm most familiar with, but I know that it's not always HTTP. But usually, you find that many REST implementations use HTTP. And then the client application. So client applications are like the way you have Postman, the way you have your browser. So you could use any language or set of tools to make an HTTP request and to pass the response. So one real life example is Wallet. I think I can I'll share my screen now. Wallet to Africa. They have, I mean, this is something that I use, so that's why I'm going to show it now. Sorry, give me a minute.
Yeah, you're already sharing the presentation. Do you have a different window that you'd like to share?
Okay. Oh yeah, sure. So I'm going to do that now.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I'll
Yeah.
just comment on a few of the things you've been showing here, which are
Yeah.
the fact that you kind of mentioned that there's sort of less details, which makes it really nice in the sense that you can be fairly flexible, whether you want to do it over JSON over RPC or you want to use REST or SOAP, whatever it is, right? It's just a way of communicating. And at the end, it's just implementation details, but it's really flexible in that sense where as long as you know sort of how to talk to it, you can be fairly generic and fairly loose and flexible.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so my network is a bit slow. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think I would have. But what I like on Wallet, you can use any language to make your request. You could use C sharp. You could use I don't know. I think they also have the option for PHP. But I mean C sharp was what I tried to use. Yeah, so let
For
me
folks who may not
just
be
share
familiar
my
with wallets,
presentation.
is this like a payment processing platform or what is wallets?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So just like PayPal, the reason why I'm giving it as an example is because I tried using it, and I mean, yeah. So I mean, you could. I'm sure. I don't know. PayPal may have this kind of feature, but I found wallets really easy to use and really enjoyable because that was when I was able to see in real life this whole idea of using any language of your choice to make your requests. Yeah. So I shall. Let me share my presentation again. Okay. Okay. Can you see my presentation now?
It's coming through.
Oh, great. Oh, no. So sorry.
No worries. Yeah, as you're loading this up, I'm just going to speak more generally about some of the underlying things that are going on here. So we've been discussing web APIs and how they are, kind of like the basis behind them when you would use them, the different ways to use them, some of the lower level protocols. We talked about HTTP, HTTPS, which is the secure version of the hypertext transfer protocol. We've talked about SOAP, which is the simple object access protocol. We talked about gRPC a bit. There's TCP. There's all sorts of different ways for communications to exist over the web and pulling resources. So your slide's back on now.
And Dave, for our guests that are just joining us, I just want to say again that we're here with Sophie Obomighie, who is a relatively recent C# developer who is sharing what she's learned about Web API with us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, Sophie.
Thank you so much. So I shall continue. Yes. So I just really wanted to show the whole idea of using any language with REST, using any language to generate your request. Well, I hope we check it out ourselves later on. Okay. So this is just like a summary of the REST itself, REST as a protocol, its constraints. So I have like a general explanation of this, but this is like a summary of what they are. So you have uniform interface, and then there's the client-server relationship, and then the stateless. When I found out about stateless, I mean, I wasn't really familiar with stateless and stateful, but I'll talk about it as we go forward. And then also the layering of the system, and then the code on demand. So more explanation of this. Okay, so this is like a mishmash, like the way I see it. So for REST APIs, right? I mentioned earlier that resources have their identifiers, right? If they don't have an identifier, you won't be able to call them, you won't be able to access them, right? So it really means then that the REST APIs are like designed around resources, and then these resources can be accessed by the client, which this like client applications like Postman or Insomnia or whatever, and then the client can then interact with the service. The service can also be the resource, yeah. So it can interact by exchanging representations of these resources. So I will speak more about HTTP verbs later on, but then there needs to be a standard for how how like say Postman makes requests and then how it interacts with the resources. So the format could be in JSON, it could be in XML. I mean, there are so many, but then it is able to make requests using HTTP verbs. And then another thing is that it has, I mean, with REST APIs, you have like uniform interface. And because you have like standard verbs, you have get, patch, put, standard verbs, and then they help to like perform specific operations on these resources. So the resource could be an item, maybe an item in my to-do list. And then, so this whole thing of uniform interface kind of like breaks down the clients and server implementation, how they interact. So I have already given an example of get, post, put, patch, and delete. So by stateless request model, it means really that when the client makes a request, it is using the information that it has gotten from that point of making the request. It uses that information to interact with the resource. It cannot save or it cannot use information from say the server, like it's not stateful. I mean, that's the opposite of stateless. So it's not able to use extra information outside of what it has been given.
I
Yeah,
just
so,
want to.
So just let me ask. So what you're saying there is that each request is what's the word I'm looking for? Atomic, right? Each request.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so that's really about that.
I just wanted to take a second to say that I think it's really great to kind of dissect each of these parts and break them down and explain them this way. As a developer who's been doing this for a very long time, we tend to kind of forget some of these, generic definitions. And when you take a step back and really absorb some of these, key components, it really makes a lot of sense. We're talking about uniform resource identifiers. So we have resources on a web server. We're talking about how the clients will access them, the different protocols, and this is awesome. You're doing great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I just want to talk about some best practices when implementing REST. So it's usually, this is normal because REST itself is organized around resources, but implementing that idea, it's usually better to use like the way you hear about stories, right? Use that story. So instead of saying maybe list my to-do list. To-do list even sounds better, but not using what the resource is doing, but what the resource is. I don't know if that makes sense. You don't know. There's no need to explain that. Okay, when giving it a URI, saying getting my to-do list. That's just silly. But you could just name it to do, or maybe to do then one. Maybe that's the first to do on your list, right? So it's usually best practice to make it as concise as possible, and then using not just concise, but using the nouns instead of the verb. Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a bit. I got this from Mozilla. This was the first website I came across that really explained the HTTP verbs, the get, post, put, patch, and delete. So from here we can see that for get, it is making a request for a specific resource, right? So with get, you are not uploading data, you are not giving data, you are asking for data or for a resource using its URI. And then for post, you can use it to submit entities. So maybe using the to do example, you want to update your to-do list, and then you say, okay, you post, maybe I'm going to see my friend today, and then you add it you are able to submit using the post request. And then, of course, it changes on the server because you are making a request. And then for the put method, so they could be called methods, they could be called verbs. So the put method, it's to replace all the representations of a particular resource. So you specify what you need what you need the put method to do in the body and all. Yeah. So and then sometimes put and patch seem. Yeah. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, so put is something that we would use for updating a resource, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So maybe just a part. Maybe you already have your to do is to see your friend, but you want to maybe change the date. You want to change many things. You want to change that particular resource, not adding a new one, but changing that particular one. Maybe you made a mistake in everything. Unlike patch that you are changing just a particular part of that particular entity. So the entity really is the resource, and then the entity has different. Can I call them models? Like different properties really. So maybe the date, the deadline of the task, the time you imputed it, is it done? Those kind of things, yeah. And then of course, obviously,
See, I
delete
didn't.
is for you.
I was just going to say I didn't know what the patch verb did. I'll be honest. I have seen it as a verb mentioned. No idea that it was for partial modifications to a resource. So
Yeah.
I just learned something new, Sophie. Thank you.
There's another interesting thing. So a lot of people get confused with put, and there's actually a verb that's not on here, which is update. And update doesn't actually update. It updates part of the negotiation between different types of like more open-ended communications. So it's a lot of people think that update is the update when instead it's actually put.
Good, exactly. Yeah. So thank you for chipping that in. Okay. Okay, then my next slide is just to talk a bit. So when we hear APIs, we need to like kind of understand that you need resources to work with it. So for testing, for even we know I've been speaking about client application. So the client application can be Postman. And I mean, I gave other examples. There's Insomnia, Fiddler. I came across Postwoman. One lady, she did a really good job because from her story, she was like she didn't have a powerful laptop to run her requests and everything. So, but then she decided to build one on the web, so like a postman, but for the web. So, so she called it Postwoman. So I mean, I just decided to put that in as a fun fact. Okay, and then also your code editor, your text editor. I mean, you of course to write your code. Then I'm writing SQL Server here. Just I mean, as an example of a DB, there are so many DBs, and the database you decide to use would determine. Even though I did speak about entity framework, the database you decide to use will determine the particular um, entity framework you would install. So entity framework is an object relational mapper that helps with the interaction between your database and your models. Yeah, so I just put SQL servers in, and then SQL Server Express
Well,
is for working with
well,
SQL
Sophie,
Server.
let me ask for your opinion on something here. What database do you prefer working with?
Well, prefer. I don't know if prefer is the best word because I feel like it's based on what you want to do. But for
Mhm.
like testing out, I just use an in memory database. But for like really big, maybe I want to try out more things. I try SQL Server and MySQL. So yeah, so
Okay.
I think it depends. Yeah, I think it really depends
Oh,
on
love
what
it, love it. It
you want.
depends. That's the right answer there.
That is a great answer,
Yeah.
you brought up a great point that I didn't even learn until a few years ago. In-memory databases are a great option for, particularly for test scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think that's really it for the presentation. I was thinking I could share something that I worked on.
Please
That's from
do.
the two aspects. Yeah. So from the aspect of building APIs, and then from the aspect of work of like working with APIs. Okay. So
Oh, wait!
for
I think
building.
I reckon I would just think I recognize that link at the top there.
Oh yeah, look.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I just like a mishmash of everything, all my resources, and oh, I mean, there's a lot.
I was gonna say I think I recognize
Okay.
most of those links.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I'll stop sharing this tab and then share my code editor. Okay, so I worked on I've actually worked on a couple. I mean, not so many, a couple of like practice APIs, but like I think the most stable is my To Do API. It's on GitHub. I can share it. Uh, but then just to show what I have, and then I think one very frustrating thing about APIs is every single time I always have errors. Like just a few minutes before the call, the EF call. I don't know what I think I messed up with the versioning because I had to change. I used 3.1 .NET. I used .NET 3.1 and then I had to start changing them, and then I messed up my EF call. I don't know. Always giving me so many issues. Okay. I wonder if you can see my screen.
It's loading. I just
Okay.
wanted to share that we have got lots of friends in the chat here that really appreciate and are sending good vibes your way. They're really
Oh,
enjoying
thank
what the presentation.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. So
So,
okay. So
so
even
I
though
see here
this
that you have Visual
my
Studio
app,
Code. Sorry about that. You have Visual Studio Code, and do you have any
yeah,
extensions installed on it to sort of help with the syntax highlighting and all the fun stuff that you see on here?
yeah. Okay. So exactly. So I mean I have some errors that I need to fix. Anyway, I just want to show how it works. I think that's what matters. Please close your eyes to the errors for now. Okay.
I love
So
it. Close your
I
eyes
mean.
to the errors.
Yeah. Okay. So just like a walkthrough of what I did here. So this is supposed to be a to-do API. I'm supposed to be able to test it with Postman, but sadly, something terrible happened. Maybe I was cursed by Voldemort. Okay.
And it comes back full circle. Love it.
We need to find a Horcrux to smash.
Yeah. So the first thing I know, right? I know, right? Okay. So let me just go on. So the first thing really I did was to create the API, and I usually prefer using the terminal. I feel like I don't know, it's easier to spot mistakes and all. I know that some people prefer to use like Visual Studio to like I know Visual Studio has like very easy ways of setting these kind of things up, but I think I prefer VS Code and also using the terminal. But I sometimes use Visual Studio. Okay, so the command I used, I think it was .NET new. I mean, you can always check the website, but I just try to spin up a template or a template API project. So I think it's .NET new, maybe minus O web API. Yeah. So okay. Anyway, I'm just trying to like practice to show you guys. I hope I'm correct. Maybe to do.
Well, I'm already
I hope
impressed
this.
that you've got less than a year under your belt and you're sitting here doing command line arguments into the .NET CLI. That is amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. And already I have seen the mistake I've made. Anyway, I think if we go through every single process, we may spend the whole day. But it's supposed to be .NET New dash O Web API to do. To do is like the name. So anyway, that was the first thing I did. I created the API template, and then I added EF Core as my ORM. I added the EF Core package, and usually you could even do that like manually using it from the CS Proj file, but I don't think that's best practice. So, but then I just use the command. Sometimes I don't remember the command all the time, so I just Google it and then I get the command to install EF Core. So remember I said the database you decide to use will determine which particular EF Core package you install. But so here I'm using an in-memory database. You could use SQL Server. I mean, you could use MySQL. You could use I don't know different ones for. And then what changes is just this part that says in memory. That's really what changes. And one thing also we need to be careful of is the versioning. Sometimes the versioning could get messed up, right? And I mean errors if they are not if the version of the EF core is not compatible with the version of your net core, your .NET SDK, then of course it won't work. Okay, so I mean, after installing the in-memory database, I then worked on the models. I just created a models folder here, as you can see, which is where the errors are living. Anyway, so I created the models folder, and then after creating that, I created the models file, which holds the the to-do item. The to-do item is like an entity, right? And then ID name is complete. These are like its properties that the each entity would have. So I said that, and then also I set up the DB context. You could see that there are two files in the models folder. You have the to do context. So this really is. So this is like really what helps EF core work, right? And helps you with like interacting with your database and all of that. So that's really the whole essence of having your DB context, that the database context file. And I think also having it in the same folder kind of shows really how closely related the model and the DB context is. I mean, since an ORM really is kind of helping with the entity relationship, the relationship between the entity and then the model. Yeah. So
So
that's the
what you're saying-
database.
so what
Just sorry. Go ahead, Cam.
Oh, see, I didn't mean to step on you, Luis. So what you're saying is that the database context is like it represents your database session and all the communication that you have with your database.
Exactly that.
Okay.
So yeah, so I mean, you can even see the using statement, the Microsoft Entity Framework code, which helps us to see that it's really
just to-
for EF code.
And just to kind of highlight here, right? It's at this point you haven't told it, hey, this is an in-memory database, this is a SQL Server, Postgres, whatever. I mean, you know
Yeah.
from the package which type of database you're probably going to be using, but when you're defining these models, it really doesn't care what type of database you're using. You're just defining here's what the things that are going to be inside of my database and how I'm going to interact with them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very correct. Thank you. Okay, so then the next thing I did was to register this DB context, because this DB context could just be here and not the application may not even know that it exists. So I need to register it, right? And I did that here in the startup.cs file. So I did that first of all. I added the using statements to the models, and then I put this twice. Okay. Anyway, the models and the EF core using statements. So this two are really how the first steps in like registering the DB context. And then also I have to add the dependency injection using statement, because that's what I am doing. I am literally injecting the DB context into the startup file. Startup file is like the beginning of the entire application. Then the second place that I used in registering the DB context is here in the configuration. Yeah, the configure services. Yeah, so you can see. So yeah, if I now specify the type of database, so I say use in memory, not maybe SQL Server or anything like that. So here I have injected, and then yeah, so yeah, those are the two places I used to tell the application that, hey, this is the DB context you have, right? Yeah, so that is that. And then also I still have some things here to do in the controller itself. I had to run some commands. Yeah, it's a mess now, but I had to run some commands, and all this came like they automatically updated. So I now had to like literally start editing things out to fit what I needed to do. So like the get request, everything when I ran the commands. So the commands, I think I still have them in my memory, in my terminal memory. I mean, there are a lot. So here I ran the ASP.NET code generator. I'm sorry, it's a bit slow. Yeah, I also added the EF core design package. If you check the CS bridge, so how sometimes you if you want to be sure if you have actually installed a package, you could if their package installed, you could just come to your CS bridge file to confirm, right? And yeah, and then if you don't see it here, then you know it's not installed. Or if you see that the versioning is wrong, then I mean you know what to fix. So yeah, so I also carried out. This also now involves scaffolding. That what bringing in the controllers involves scaffolding and a lot of carrying out a lot of commands and all of that. So that's where all the get methods came from. So they just come. I didn't just type them in; they came automatically, and then I just go in and just edit it and make corrections and all. So each HTTP verb would have like its own code block, like where you can like specify what it should do at each point, what error message it should give, like how it should handle exceptions and errors and all of that. So that's really what all of this is about. Okay, yeah, so that is that for working with building APIs. And then for testing, I mean, I mentioned that you use Postman. So here I have I mean, it's not really useful like that, but I try to work with a Harry Potter, Harry Potter again, a Harry Potter API I found on Open API. So what it should do is to
wait. Let me look. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Wait, what is this? This Potter API? We can't blow by this. I have to check this out.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'll check for the. I'll look for it and then share it with everybody. So it's supposed to like share. You know the way you have. Sorry.
I hear I found it. I'm going to share it with the chat. This is neat. So we have a sorting hat and. Okay, go ahead, Sophie. I'm sorry for cutting you off. I was just excited.
No problem. So it's supposed to like show like I don't know if you remember Dumbledore's army. So it's supposed to like give you the name of people in Dumbledore's army. You know that secret list of his army. So yeah, so I'm not able to get it to work now because of I've changed my key and everything anyway. But you could check it out and then you could see how you can like call. So and then another thing also so this is just using Postman. You could also use a console application, right? You could use a console application to like make calls to an API. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that I can show you more things.
Yeah, it's all really impressive.
Okay. So I just briefly want to. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I just briefly want to talk about like calling APIs, like APIs that are available online with say a console application. And I think the main thing one needs to remember when calling APIs with say a console application is this thing of a what they call HTTP client, right? The HTTP client, can I call it keyword? Anyway, the HTTP client. So you have to the first time I worked with it, I mean, I didn't know what to do. I had to speak with my mentor, and then he explained how to like declare the client variable and then create a new HTTP client object. And so, I mean, you have to literally write an article. So yeah, so if you want to work with a public API using a console application, you could just check out HTTP client and then you could just work from there. So if you want, I can share the article that I have. I mean, there's so many articles online on how to work with it, but I mean, then I didn't find anyone that was really helpful, but I can share this one later on.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah,
that's a really good point, though.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're new to programming, and you're talking about like, instantiating a client, an HTTP client, and it's kind of a different mindset because with object-oriented design, you have these objects that you have to create and then rely on them to represent that functionality. It's not like with other, certain other languages, more functional or whatnot, you can just go call an API, where instead with C# you have to have an object reference that has that functionality on the object to call it.
Exactly.
So it's really interesting to hear, someone who's newer to these types of, design patterns to kind of vocalize them. Because it's something, being an old time developer now, I feel like an old time developer anyways. It's something that I never really, I guess, appreciated as much. So thank you so much for your perspective. This has been an amazing talk, and I think our guests really enjoyed today's show.
Yeah, well, the chat was
Yeah.
lit up, Sophie.
Yeah.
You have a fan club already. So so we've been highlighting
I'm
as you've been
blushing.
talking, we've been highlighting many of the complimentary things they've been saying. So if you want to go back and view the video on YouTube after the stream, definitely a lot of folks here are big fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of,
Yeah.
I was going to mention
Thank you so
earlier
much.
that, Scott kind of pointed out that he was really impressed with what you've learned, and it is nothing short of impressive. It's been less than a year since you started with these things, and there's tooling, right, and the tooling will help, but if you don't really have a mental model of
Yeah.
how things kind of fit together, it's like, well, you can't really use the tools to help you there. So just the fact that you've sort of put together these mental models of how these things interact, how these things work together, and then going and actually building an application, right? Like it like I said, it's nothing short of impressive. So
Yeah,
really well done.
I know developers who have been programming for 10 years that are still
Yeah.
afraid of the command line, and you're just like, let's just go do this. Let's do it.
Yep.
That's awesome. I did want to ask you, Sophie, are there any, kind of closing thoughts or any, experiences that you want to share that, things that you didn't like or things that you would like to critique or something that was more difficult or something that was easy, any
Yeah.
thoughts here?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, a lot of things on my mind, but I think some of the things I would love to share is that something that has really helped me is having like a very supportive community. My first training by hotels.ng and start.ng, they were helpful. So I mean some people can learn by themselves. I mean that's amazing, but I found it really helpful. And then my mentor, Vincent Warner, was super helpful. Like he made C sharp look like ABC. Like like why should you be afraid? like I didn't even know people were afraid of C sharp. I'm like, wow, why should you be afraid of it? Like, it just gives it to you. And I mean, I'm very grateful. And then also, many of my friends, like, I think really having friends that are interested in like your growth and interested and are also ready to like really go deep into things, like not just on the surface. So I had this friend who would stay up all night trying to help me with my code. Her name is Busayo Amoy. She'll stay up all night trying to help me fix my error. Sometimes I don't even understand what the error message is saying. And then, I mean, she would stay up all night. And then, I mean, many other people that, I mean, have really helpful. I mean, there are so many. But then I think, even though I'm still not where I want to be, I mean, I'm still growing and all, but I think being able to vocalize what I already know has been like it's helping me to like concretize what I think I know, helping me to be sure I know what I think I know, and yeah, so yeah, that's really it. And then I'm also a huge fan of Julie Lerman. I'm a fan
Julie,
girl.
Julie is a dear friend of all of us on the show, and
Yep.
she will be so excited to hear that.
That's awesome. Yeah, we
Yeah,
had her on
yeah.
the
So
show.
yeah, so I hope I can. Yeah, I hope I can continue to build, and I hope others too can continue to build like really amazing things with .NET. I hope I can do like some more awesome stuff, which I am already trying to do at my workplace. And yeah, so yeah, so that's really it for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being on. Much appreciated. We're looking forward to next week with our guest, Daniel, who's going to be discussing .NET authentication and the Microsoft Identity Platform. So thank you again, Sophia, so much for being on, and tune in next week.
Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you
Thanks,
again,
folks.
Sophie.
Bye.
Thank you, folks. See you next week.
Yep.
See ya.